$2,000 for Saturday through Sunday, Evan said, like he was quoting square footage instead of selling me hours with my own blood. The paper he slid across the island made a soft whisper against the marble, a grandparent time agreement, his handwriting fat and certain at the bottom. $2,000. My daughter kept her eyes on the sink and let the water run as if it could rinse the moment off the dishes. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Naperville, Friday, December 5th, 6:40 p.m. Frost whitening the porch rail. I'd come with a tin of ginger snaps, warm enough to scent my coat, and 2 library books with bright dust jackets for the kids. The kitchen lights were too bright. Everybody looks guilty under daylight bulbs. Somewhere behind me the oven timer dinged, a tidy little bell that announced dinner but felt like a gavel. "It's not a fee," Evan said, tapping the paper. "It's help with expenses. You know how it is. Activities, food, gas. Expenses have receipts," I said. "This has a price tag." He smiled the sales smile, the one that tells you the door is already closing. He lifted a pen and made a little flourish under the number, like he was staging a property for a photo. "You want time with them this weekend? This is what keeps everything fair." My daughter shut off the tap and dried her hands slow. I noticed the towel was printed with tiny red cardinals. The silence sat on my shoulders. I set the cookie tin down and reached into my coat. "Since we're putting things in writing," I said. Evan's mouth twitched. He expected cash. I placed an envelope on the counter with his name block-lettered on the front. He tore it without ceremony. Out slid a notarized copy of the promissory note he'd signed on April 18th last year. $38,500 I'd fronted as their down payment. 3% monthly interest, with a clause in my simple old man language, repayment on demand if familial access is alienated. Behind it, a 1-page letter on my attorney's letterhead, Cantor and Wolf, reminding him that selling gate passes to a grandparent is not an expense, it's leverage, and leverage turns a loan into a demand. Color left his face so fast it felt like the room took it. "You're threatening me?" "No," I said as evenly as I could manage. "I'm reminding you what you signed when I believed you were building a home, not a turnstile." He flipped to the second page as if he could outrun the first. The notary seal from my neighbor Ruth shone dull and official under the kitchen spots. He jabbed at the clause with a fingernail. "This is ridiculous legal theater." "Legal, yes," I said. "Theater, no. The audience is 2 little kids who don't know their time, has a sticker on it." He shoved the pages back at me. They skidded and bumped the cookie tin. $2,000 in cash, he said lower now. "Or you can see them next month." My daughter finally looked at me, and the look wasn't anger, it was pleading. The hum of the fridge grew loud. Out on the street, a car door thumped shut. I gathered the note and the letter and slid them back into the envelope like someone tucking in a child. I left the cookies where they were. "You think this scares me?" he said. "No," I said, and even I was surprised by the calm in my throat. But paper remembers. I turned toward the back door because I had learned the hard way that sometimes leaving is the loudest, honest sound a man can make. His voice followed me down the hallway. "Bring cash next time." The cardinals on the towel watched me go. In the cold, my breath fogged like a failing engine. I could taste ginger and copper. I set the envelope on the passenger seat and stared at the ink on the flap until the night doubled. Collapse doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's a man counting digits on a loan and realizing love without boundaries is begging. I started the car and let the heater tick toward warm, already knowing what tomorrow had to be. I didn't start the engine right away. The heater ticked like a cooling pan, and the dashboard clock said 6:58 p.m. The porch light behind me blinked off, then on again, like a tired eyelid trying to stay civil. Downers Grove in early December smells faintly of dryer vents and road salt. I watched a curl of my breath fog the windshield and fade, like the old way of life I kept insisting would come back if I just showed up with cookies. My phone buzzed. Voicemail icon. I pressed it on speaker and braced. My daughter's voice arrived smaller than it is in person, like the phone had folded her down. Dad, please don't make it worse. We'll figure something out. Just don't do this tonight. I replayed it once, then a third time, because pain has a way of asking for evidence against itself. I wanted her to say, I'll bring them over. Forget him, but what she said was, don't make it worse. I looked at the envelope on the passenger seat, and the ink, where I'd block-lettered his name, the way you label a box you mean to never lose, and realized I had already started making it better. But better and louder can sound the same in the first 10 minutes. The $20,800 receipt for Emma's summer program was folded with the creases I'd made in July when I stuck it under a fridge magnet and wrote for Emma on the Zelle memo line like it was a prayer. I took it out, the paper warm from my pocket, and ran my thumb over the date. July 14th. I'd paid $1,050 in HOA dues on August 10th, and again November 1st, both with my name typed into Lydia's tidy emails. Applied sponsor credit to Unit 14B. Sponsor credit. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until the stitches pressed crescents into my palms. Somewhere in the neighborhood a dog barked twice and wheezed. The ordinary sounds of other people's Saturdays were starting. I told myself out loud, in the closed car, 38,500 at 3% for 8 months. Not to threaten, to anchor. Numbers are steadier than feelings when your chest softens like a rotten plank underfoot. 3% monthly on 38,500, 1,155, 8 months, 9,140. I said it again, slower, to keep my voice from shaking. I pictured my late wife's neat handwriting on a grocery list. Milk, celery, thread, and for a second I could smell the thread. The sharp cotton ink smell from when she marked the hems of our daughter's curtains. Memory is the cruelest proof. It proves you used to be believed. I texted Ruth, "Are you up?" She replied in under a minute, a small mercy. "I always am." Kettle on. I pulled out into the cautious dark and drove the 6 minutes to her duplex. The world had that bleached look it gets before snow, like light trying to remember its job. Ruth is the kind of neighbor whose door is always half open because she believes in air and people. She had on wool socks and a sweatshirt that said notary in block letters because she thinks jokes are better when you can certify them. She handed me a mug before I asked. "Honey or lemon?" she said. "Both," I said, because I needed sweetness and bite. We sat at her little kitchen table under a brass lamp that hums a little when it's been on too long. The table had a legal pad on it because Ruth believes that what gets written gets solved. What happened, she said, not really a question. I told her in the pieces I could hold without dropping. The island, the towel with cardinals, the number, the smile, the envelope. I put the $2,800 receipt, the HOA emails, and the promissory note on the table like I was setting out cutlery. She slid her reading glasses down her nose and checked the notary seal she'd stamped last April. "Still good ink," she said, and the kindness of it cracked me. I put my hand over my face and felt with embarrassment the heat of tears. "He priced them," I said. "He put a sticker on 2 heads. Ruth's hand landed on my wrist, light pressure that said, "Don't fight the water." "Paper protects people," she said, "but it needs a spine to stand up. Tonight you breathe, then you write." She flipped the legal pad and wrote in a tidy schoolteacher script, "Goal, time with kids without gatekeeping. Tactics, lawful, visible, undeniable." She read it back to me like a recipe. "Say it," she said. I did, and the words stuck less on the second pass. "Tomorrow," she said, "you take everything to Cantor. He'll hate the schedule selling. He lives for lines people cross in ink. He'll draw you better ones." She tapped the clause in the note, repayment on demand if familial access is alienated, with a finger that had ink on the cuticle. "You wrote this to be dramatic." "Turns out it was prophetic. I wrote it because I know how people get when money is thin," I said. But I stopped. I didn't think I'd ever be on the far side of my daughter's door, in a car, counting interest as a way to stop counting losses. Ruth reached into a drawer and took out her notary log. "April 18th, she read. "Evan, last name, not my daughter's name. Kitchen, 2:17 p.m., purpose down payment assistance. I noted your phrase relational access because I liked it. She smiled, small and proud of my clumsy poetry. You gave him a ladder and wrote, "Don't kick it away" on the side. He kicked. Is it dirty to use this? I asked, finally voicing the tremor. Am I the one making it worse? The radiator clicked, then breathed out heat like a tired animal. Ruth didn't let me look away. You're using the rules you both signed. That's not dirty. That's faithful. At 11:47 p.m., after the tea had gone cold and been refreshed and gone lukewarm again, I texted Cantor, "Need guidance for respectful enforcement. No surprises, no police. Want schedule, not war." My phone buzzed with the triple dots, and then his reply came at 12:07 a.m. Come by 9 a.m., bring everything. He is not a man of extra words. It calmed me like a clean checklist. I drove home through streets that had begun to sparkle with what might become snow. The houses wore their holiday lights, like they were trying a little too hard to be believed. Inside my place, I laid the promissory note, Zelle screenshots, Lydia's emails, and the text thread with Evan on the coffee table in a fan-like exhibits. Collapse, it turns out, has a sound. It sounds like printer paper tapping paper, like a man aligning corners so something in his life will line up. I took out a pen and underlined the line in Cantor's letter that said, "This correspondence seeks respectful resolution." I underlined respectful twice. Then I wrote on an index card and propped it against the cookie tin I'd brought back with me. No cash for access, only calendars. At 1:03 a.m., my daughter's second voicemail arrived. "Dad, what did you give him?" Her voice was small again, but not pleading this time. Curious, worried, maybe ready to know. I didn't call back. Not yet. I didn't trust my voice to build anything delicate. I turned off the lamp and watched the living room in the half-dark. The way the refrigerator light leaks around the corner. The way the ginger in the cookies still scented the air. I thought of Emma's paper crown in a drawer, of my grandson's scuffed sneakers by my back door, of April 18th at 2:17 p.m. in Ruth's kitchen when we believed that help makes people bigger, not smaller. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was plotting a boundary. The difference is simple. Revenge wants you to bleed. A boundary wants you to stop. I slept with the binder on the coffee table like a lighthouse. At 8:02 a.m., the kettle clicked on by itself because I'd set the timer. An old man trick for making morning kinder. By 8:40, I had the documents clipped into tidy piles, a fresh legal pad in my bag, and the envelope with Evan's name in the block letters tucked where I could see it. I locked my front door, felt the small resistance of the deadbolt, and listened to the clear, honest sound of something closing that was allowed to close. Then I drove to Cantor's office to learn how to carry paper like a shield. You don't need force when you have forms, Mr. Cantor said, tapping his blue pen against the line I'd underlined months ago. Repayment on demand if familial access is alienated. He was half smiling, half frowning, the way people do when they're both disgusted and impressed. His office on Jefferson Street always smelled like old coffee and legal pads. It was Saturday morning, December 6th, 9:12 a.m. Outside, snow drifted like ash. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Cantor wore a sweater vest the color of oatmeal and spoke in bullet points. Step 1, document his demand. Step 2, build your pattern of prior support. Step 3, present it calmly, publicly, verifiably. He slid my papers into piles with a lawyer's precision. Loan note, text thread, HOA emails, Zelle confirmations, summer program receipt, all anchored by one ugly text from Evan. 2K and you can have them sat, son. Cantor tapped that line twice. This text, he said, is the whole case in one sentence. Not in court, but in life. I don't want a case, I said. I want my grandkids. Then you'll need structure, not anger, he said. Structure holds where emotion leaks, he wrote on his yellow pad in tight cursive. Prepare formal repayment. Demand linked to access schedule. Certify HOA ledger and tuition. Payment as pattern of support notarized. Affidavit from Ruth confirming April signing. Public reveal, learned family. Dinner, dash controlled environment. I stared at the fourth line. You think I should bring it up at dinner? I think you should let the documents do it for you, he said. You don't raise your voice. You raise your evidence. When I left his office at 10:15, my breath made clouds in the parking lot. The world looked bright, cruelly bright, like every car window reflected something I'd missed. I stopped at a strip mall coffee shop, ordered black, and opened my phone. 10:32 a.m. Text from Lydia, HOA manager. I can print both statements with your payments noted. Need them stamped? I replied, yes, please. With dates, Og 10 and Nov, 1:10:44 a.m. Text from Ruth, here all day if you need the affidavit notarized. Tea's better than Cantor's coffee anyway. By 11:30, I was at Ruth's kitchen table again, the same lamp humming, her cat sleeping in a bread loaf shape near the window. She pulled out her notary journal, the April 18th entry glowing like an old truth. Purpose, down payment assistance. Witnessed by me. She wrote a one-page affidavit summarizing that day. Who signed, where, what was agreed, and stamped it with her raised seal. I never thought that phrase you used. Relational access would end up mattering this much, she said. Neither did I admitted. It sounded poetic at the time, like a safeguard no one would ever test. She slipped the document into a folder marked Affidavit of Witness. Ruth Delgado, December 6th. The sound of the seal pressing paper felt heavier than it should. At 12:05 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was Mark, my daughter's brother, the one person in that family who still used both ears before opening his mouth. Evan's been bragging again, he said. Told a few guys at the country club you're on a leash till you pay up. A leash, I repeated. That's poetic too. You gonna do something? I'm gonna let him read what he already signed. At 1 p.m., I laid everything on my dining table in neat stacks. Cantor's demand letter on top, the HOA statement next. The summer tuition receipt for $12,800, folded behind a photo of Emma in her paper crown from school play. I wanted whoever flipped that page to see her face before the figure. Then the loan note, the affidavit, and finally the printed text message from Evan. I bought a cookie box from the grocery store, the kind with the red ribbon and fake snowflakes, and set the packet inside it. A ledger disguised as sweetness. I added a small folded card on top that read, "For the family." I smiled when I wrote it. That was the truth. I could already hear Ruth's line in my head. Paper protects people, but protection isn't peace. Not yet. It's the promise that someone will have to face their reflection eventually. By 3:45 p.m., Lydia emailed again, stamped and ready. I'll drop by at 5 with the HOA ledger unit 14B, credits by your name. Proof arriving like clockwork. I looked at the growing binder, the sections labeled in block letters, loan, HOA, tuition, texts, demand. I'd become my own archivist. Every family betrayal needs an archivist. Otherwise, liars get to rewrite history. As I closed the binder, I thought of my daughter's voicemail again. Don't make it worse. The truth was, I wasn't. I was making it undeniable. At 4:15 p.m., Cantor called one last time. Remember, he said, your voice stays low, your papers stay high. You're not punishing him. You're reminding him of gravity. Some people only respect weight when they can feel it. I sat at my desk long after dark. Outside, the first real snow began to fall, slow and steady, like the world was signing something invisible in cursive. I sealed the cookie box and pressed the lid until it clicked. The noise echoed through the room. Then, because old habits die slow, I whispered to the empty air, no force. Just forms. The kettle clicked off. The papers waited in the box like truth waiting for its stage. Tomorrow they would have one. Clarity is a kind of kindness. And that Saturday afternoon, I decided to be kind in the most precise way possible. By 2 p.m., my living room looked less like a home and more like a quiet war room. Papers fanned across the dining table, tabs lined like sentries. I dragged out my old label maker from my years at the facilities office. Each click and hiss of the tape felt like reclaiming control. Loan, HOA, tuition, texts, demand, 5 dividers, 5 truths. Ruth had dropped by with a fresh thermos of coffee and her quiet smile. Don't overthink the ink, she said, leaning against the doorway. "You're not preparing for battle. You're just giving memory a backbone." I nodded. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just documentation. It was dignity with timestamps. I printed the repayment options Cantor had drafted that morning. 2 clean, plain choices. Option A, begin repayment at $450 a month, starting January 1st, automatic transfer. Option B, early settlement of $39,190 by March 31st, interest prorated, with lien release and an attached grandparent access schedule, every other Saturday morning, 2 Wednesdays a month for dinner, and guaranteed attendance at birthdays and school events, no cash for time. No barter for love, only structure. I printed 3 copies, one for me, one for Evan and my daughter, and one for his parents. I slipped them into labeled folders and sealed them with tabs. On the front of each folder, I wrote in neat black ink, options for restoration. At 3:12 p.m., the printer whirred again, spitting out the HOA ledger Lydia had emailed, stamped in blue with Unit 14B, credits by my name. The total, $130.50, paid by me across 2 quarters. Beneath it, Lydia's handwritten note, "Your timely assistance avoided late fees. Appreciated." I slid that page behind the tuition section, where the $2,800 summer program receipt waited, paper-clipped to the Zelle transfer record that said, "For Emma." And behind that, my favorite act of quiet rebellion, a photo of her wearing the paper crown she'd made at the same camp, beaming at a construction paper sun. Whoever flipped through the folder would have to look at her before they saw the dollar sign. The next page carried the text printout. $2K and you can have them sat, son. I underlined it once in blue and once in red. Not for drama, just visibility. Paper doesn't have a voice, but color helps it speak. By 4 p.m., the binder was complete, 1/2 inch thick, tidy, undeniable. I took out the cookie box from the pantry, the red one with snowflakes and a windowed lid. I lifted the cookies Ruth had baked that morning and set the binder inside, then placed the cookies neatly back on top. I folded gold tissue paper around it like wrapping a peace treaty. The card went last, for the family. The irony made me smile for the first time that day. At 4:20 p.m., I received a message from my daughter, tomorrow 5 p.m. at Mom and Dad's, Evan's parents. Please be civil. I typed back one word, always. Still, I knew civility can only exist where respect hasn't been pawned. And Evan had traded his for arrogance months ago. By 6 p.m., I was ironing my shirt. Not for vanity, presentation. You can't teach someone about responsibility if you show up looking unkept. I hung my coat on the back of the chair and reread the binder for the 5th time, like a script I needed to know by heart. Every clause, every comma, every dollar accounted for. I paused at the clause that started it all. On alienation of familial access, lender may demand repayment. Evan had laughed when he read it last spring. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? He'd said, chuckling while sipping beer on Ruth's patio. Maybe, I told him. But one day you'll be grateful for my drama. It's cheaper than my silence. I closed the binder and pressed it flat. I could almost hear Ruth's voice in my head again. Paper protects people. At 7:30 p.m., I went for a short walk around the neighborhood. Snow had begun to fall, dusting roofs and driveways like powdered sugar. Inside the houses, lights glowed warm and gold. I thought about how family dinners are supposed to smell. Ham, cinnamon, forgiveness. Tomorrow's dinner would smell like all 3, plus one new ingredient, accountability. When I got home, I slid the binder back into the cookie box and tied it with the red ribbon. I wrote one last note on a post-it and stuck it under the lid. No threats, no yelling. Let the paper speak. Then I placed the gift bag by the front door, alongside my gloves and scarf. Before going to bed, I stood by the window, watching the snow thicken on the streetlights. My reflection looked older than it had that morning, but calmer too. There's something steady about having everything written down, like the universe can't gaslight you anymore. I whispered to the dark. Tomorrow, no shouting, just reading. The wind picked up, brushing frost against the glass, and I imagined each snowflake carrying a clause of my own making. The night was quiet, deliberate, lawful, exactly how I wanted my revenge to feel. Sunday mornings in early December carry a strange kind of stillness, the world between frost and holiday music, between family and facade. I woke before dawn that day, the day of the dinner, with the certainty that something irreversible was about to happen. 4 a.m., kettle on. I set the cookie tin and gift bag on the counter like two silent witnesses. The binder inside waited under layers of gold tissue, heavy with proof, light with justice. At 8 a.m., I opened my phone to find his text waiting for me like a snake on the doorstep. Evan, bring cash, not paperwork. I stared at it for a moment, the gall of it, the complete confidence of a man who thought my silence was permanent. Then I set the phone down beside the sugar bowl, mixed ginger and molasses, and started baking, the house filled with the scent of ginger snaps at 325 degrees. My wife's old recipe, one I hadn't used since before she passed. There was something grounding in it, the rhythm of rolling dough, the warmth spreading through the kitchen, the small rebellion of sweetness before a storm. By 10:30 a.m., I had 24 cookies cooling on the rack, and the snow outside had turned to a quiet drizzle. The day was soft, but my pulse was not. At 1:12 p.m., Lydia's email pinged through. Subject, Unit 14B, credits by your name. Body, stamped and verified. August 10 and November 1st payments confirmed. I printed it immediately. The stamp in blue ink looked almost decorative, like it belonged in a holiday card. Proof wrapped in politeness. That's how I preferred my justice. I slid it behind the tuition receipt for $2,800. Clipped together with Emma's camp photo, the one where she's missing a tooth and grinning like the world hasn't learned to lie to her yet. Every time I saw that photo, the anger softened into focus. This wasn't about punishing her father. It was about protecting her from learning that love could be rented by the hour. At 3:03 p.m., my daughter called. Her voice was trembling before she even said my name. "Dad, please. Evan's parents think you're coming to cause a scene. They don't want tension tonight." I took a breath. The radiator hissed like punctuation. "Honey," I said gently, "the scene was already caused when he put a price on your children. I'm not coming to fight. I'm coming to finish something." There was a silence on her end long enough that I could hear a faint TV in the background, a children's show theme song. Then she whispered, "Please don't embarrass us." "Embarrassment," I said, "is what happens when the truth shows up uninvited. Tonight it has an RSVP." When the call ended, I sat for a long time, staring at the steam from my mug. It curled and vanished, just like patience does when it isn't renewed. I folded my scarf, polished my shoes, and laid my coat on the back of the chair. 15 p.m. I loaded the cookies and binder-filled gift bag into the car. The streets toward Downers Grove shimmered with meltwater, reflecting the pale sun. Holiday wreaths hung unevenly on porches. People smiled in passing cars, the way strangers do when they assume your life is ordinary. I parked a block away from Evan's parents' house at 4:30 as planned. Their place was one of those two-story split levels with fake shutters and a new deck that probably cost half a year's salary. Through the window, I could see a long dining table dressed in a runner of fake holly. The place cards glittering under warm light, kids' coats piled by the stairs. I sat there for a full minute, hands on the steering wheel, heartbeat drumming under my ribs. My reflection in the windshield looked older but sharper, like a blade that had finally remembered what it was for. When I stepped out, the air was thin and crisp. I could smell the ham cooking even from the walkway. At the porch, the door opened before I could knock. Evan filled the frame, smirking like he was welcoming a defeated tenant. "Did you bring the $2,000?" he asked. I smiled back. "Something better," I said, lifting the gift bag and the tin of cookies. He laughed, quick and mean. "You think I'm kidding, old man?" "No," I said softly. "I think you're nervous." Inside, the house glowed warm. His mother was in the kitchen, fussing over side dishes. His father, silver-haired and kind-eyed, sat in the den watching the Bears pregame, muted. A candle flickered on the table, making shadows dance across the framed family photos. I spotted one of Emma and my grandson from last Christmas, smiling in the same sweaters I'd bought them. I placed the gift bag among the others on the buffet under a poinsettia and set the cookie tin beside it. "For dessert," I told his mother. She smiled and thanked me, not knowing what sat beneath the gold tissue. As more family arrived, the rooms swelled with laughter, chatter, and the clinking of silverware. I stayed near the window, letting the small talk roll past me. My daughter came over once, smoothed my tie, and whispered, "Thank you for being here." I just nodded. I wasn't here for the meal. I was here for the message. When the doorbell rang at 5:10, Evan's cousins poured in, shaking snow from their coats. The stage was set, a full table, too much wine, and a man convinced he was untouchable. I glanced toward the buffet. The gold tissue gleamed softly under the chandelier. Beneath it, a half-inch of quiet reckoning waited in the shape of a binder. That's the thing about revenge done right. It doesn't scream. It sits patiently, disguised as something sweet, waiting for the perfect moment to be opened. Evan didn't realize he'd already opened the evidence that would undo him. His mother, tidy and efficient, had mistaken the gold-striped gift bag for a dessert drop-off. She smiled when she found the tin of ginger snaps wrapped in tissue and lifted it onto the buffet beside the pies. Beneath the cookies, the binder rested like a buried fuse. She moved it aside to make room for the plates, setting it on the end of the table near the crystal bowl of cranberries. Unknowing hands sometimes deliver justice better than any plan could. Dinner began, the way all respectable family dinners do, with polite lies. "You're looking well," his mother said. "Still keeping busy?" his father asked. I smiled and told them I'd been organizing my files. Evan chuckled at that, a small, dismissive sound that only I seemed to catch. 5:45 p.m. The ham came out. The Bears game droned quietly from the den, a soundtrack of ordinary Sunday noise. The kids laughed over paper crowns from the crackers someone had laid at each setting. I let myself enjoy the sight of them for one breath. Then Evan raised his glass. "To family," he said, "and to providing for family." He looked right at me over the rim of his wineglass. "Because family isn't free, right?" A few chuckles, his cousins not sure what he meant, but willing to laugh anyway. The warmth drained from the table faster than the gravy boat. He leaned back in his chair, red-cheeked from wine and ego. "Dad, you'll appreciate this. Some folks think they can just show up for weekends and holidays, eat the food, play Grandpa of the Year, and skip out on the bill. But in this house, everyone contributes." The fork in my hand felt heavier than metal should. I placed it down carefully and looked around. My daughter's eyes were wide, silently begging. His mother frowned. His father's expression was blank but attentive. "Before dessert," Evan said, turning to me, "maybe we should square up, old man?" A spoon clattered onto a plate. The children froze. Someone murmured, "Evan, not now." I stood, slowly, deliberately. My napkin brushed against my lap as I set it on the table. "You're right," I said. "We should square up." I walked to the buffet. The room quieted, chairs creaking as heads turned. I lifted the cookie tin. "You know," I said lightly, "I actually brought something for the family." He smirked. "Is it cash?" "Something better." I removed the top layer of cookies, folded back the tissue, and revealed the binder. The metallic rings caught the chandelier light. I carried it to the table and opened it flat. Let's look at what family has cost so far. The first page, HOA ledger, $1,050, stamped and signed by Lydia. I slid it forward. "Paid on August 10th and November 1st, so your credit wouldn't lapse." Evan frowned, eyes darting toward his parents. "That's different. Next page, summer program receipt, $2,800. Attached Zelle screenshot for Emma, and behind it, Emma's photo in her paper crown." The silence deepened. Then the promissory note dated April 18th, notarized by Ruth, signature unmistakable. "Down payment loan," I said softly. $38,500. Repayment on demand if familial access is alienated. Evan's father adjusted his glasses. His mother's hand went to her chest. "Evan?" He reached for the binder, but I let him. He flipped to the second page, found the highlighted clause, and read aloud with a shaky laugh. This is a setup. No, I said, my voice steady. This is math. I laid down the final document, Cantor's letter, professional, polite, dated yesterday. 2 options clipped neatly beneath it. Option A, monthly repayment $450, starting Jan 1, automatic. Option B, early settlement $39,890 by March 31st, with family schedule attached. Pick the one that lets you keep your dignity, I said. Evan's face flushed scarlet. You can't what? I asked. Collect what you promised. Protect what's mine. You wrote your own receipt, son. He tried to laugh it off, but his father interrupted, voice like gravel. Did you really ask him for money to see your grandchildren? Evan opened his mouth, closed it, reached for his glass and missed. His mother whispered, Evan, tell me this isn't true. I turned the binder toward them so they could read for themselves. The gold tabs gleamed, loan, HOA, tuition, texts, demand, each one a rung on the ladder he'd kicked away. He jabbed a finger at me. You brought this here to humiliate me. No, I said, closing the binder gently. I brought it here to stop you from selling love by the hour. The snow outside thickened, soft flakes glowing in the porch light. In the reflection on the window, I saw the family behind me, my daughter frozen, the children wide-eyed, Evan's parents stricken. I turned back and spoke quietly, so every syllable cut clean. Sunday's a good day for honesty. For a moment, no one moved. Then Evan's father rose slowly from his chair and reached for the binder. Let me see that, he said. Evan tried to protest, but his mother's look silenced him. She flipped through the pages, reading the note, the receipts, the text printout. Her lips trembled. You signed this, she said to her son. The only sound in the room was the faint pop of the fireplace and the children breathing. Outside, the wind rattled the wreath against the door. Inside, the price tag on love finally fell off. The twist was simple. The gift bag wasn't cookies. It was a ledger, and every crumb of it was true. The moment the binder hit the table, the whole room changed temperature. You could feel it, the warmth from the ham, the chatter, the fake holly sparkle. All of it evaporated into that thin, fragile silence that only families know. Evan's father's fork froze halfway to his plate. His mother's breath came in short, soft bursts, like she was afraid of the truth on paper. And Evan, he just sat there with his jaw tight, that salesman's grin faltering by the second. His father finally broke it. Son, he said slowly, his voice low but cutting through the air, did you really ask him for money to see your own children? Evan's eyes darted to me, then to his wife, then back to the table. It's not what it sounds like, he said, forcing a laugh that no one joined. It was just help with expenses. You know how things are with the market right now. I turned the binder toward him, to the page that had his text printed in neat black ink. Okay, and you can have them sat, son. The line glowed under the chandelier light, like a confession written in ink. Market must be rough, I said, my voice steady. When you start charging rent for love, his father leaned closer. He wrote that? I nodded, verbatim. I even highlighted it in blue for clarity. Evan tried to smirk, but it came out as a grimace. It was a joke. He's twisting it. I wish I were, I said quietly. Believe me, I wish I'd misunderstood. His mother whispered, Evan, and her voice cracked like the edge of a plate. I laid my hands flat on the table, palms open. There are 2 paths, I said. Both legal, both fair. Option A, repay the loan you already owe, $450 a month starting January 1st. Option B, early settlement by March 31st. And with either, a formal visitation schedule. No more bargaining, no more invoices for affection. Just boundaries, respect. Evan's laugh was sharp, nervous. You can't dictate how I see my own kids. I'm not, I said. I'm dictating how you see mine. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. My daughter's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. Her hand trembled near her glass. The kids, thank God, were in the den watching TV, oblivious to the tectonic shift happening at the grown-up table. Evan's father broke it again, voice grave. Son, you don't sell family. Not for comfort. Not for cash flow. Dad, no! He slammed his palms softly but firmly against the table. You don't get to dad your way out of this one. Evan's mother turned to me, voice trembling. What do you want from him? Nothing that isn't already owed, I said. And time. That's all. Regular, structured time with my grandchildren. The same ones I read to before bedtime when their father was too busy to tuck them in. My daughter whispered, Evan, you told me it wasn't like that. You said he was exaggerating. He rubbed his face with both hands. He's trying to embarrass me. Embarrassment, I said softly, isn't a punishment. It's an invoice from your own conscience. He shot up from his chair, nearly knocking it over. You set me up. You and that old lawyer set you up, I said, still seated. You signed this in April. You had 8 months to read it. You had a chance every week to choose decency over debt. His mother flinched at his volume. His father glared at him. Sit down, the older man said. You're making it worse, but Evan kept talking, voice slurring slightly now from the wine. You think this makes you noble, huh? Showing off your paperwork, acting righteous. I stood then, calm, deliberate. No, I think it makes me a man who finally stopped begging for respect he already paid for. I reached into my coat and pulled out 3 envelopes. I laid them in a line on the table. One labeled Evan and daughter's name, one Mr. and Mrs. Evan's parents' last name, and one for myself. This is everything you need to settle this properly, I said. Each has a copy of the agreement, the repayment options, and Cantor's notice. If you choose option A tonight, I sign, and this ends quietly. If not, tomorrow morning at 9, these letters go certified. No threats. Just schedule. Evan's mother looked to her husband, stricken. Certified. Yes, ma'am, I said. USPS. Return receipt requested. Evan snatched the envelope labeled for his parents and tore it open first, desperate to prove something. He expected cash, maybe a check, maybe another humiliation he could frame as pity. Instead, he froze. There it was, his own signature, neat and permanent. Beside Ruth's raised notary seal from April 18th. His eyes darted back and forth across the page, reading his own handwriting like it belonged to someone else. He started to tremble. You tricked me. No, I said. You tricked yourself. He slammed the paper onto the table. You knew what you were doing. Yes, I said, I did. I was protecting what you were trying to sell. His father stood. Enough, he barked. Apologize to him. Right now, Evan looked like a child cornered. His mother's eyes were wet, her hands clasped. Evan, please, he didn't move. The silence filled the room again, thick and electric. And then, softly from across the table, my daughter spoke. Her voice was small but clear. Dad, I'm sorry. I turned to her, and the anger that had been sitting behind my ribs for 2 days melted into something sadder, older. You don't need to apologize, honey. You just need to see it. She nodded, tears spilling over. I do now. I sat back down slowly. The air was heavy. But for the first time all weekend, honest, Evan stood frozen, chest heaving, face pale except for 2 red spots near his temples. His father shook his head in quiet disbelief, while his mother folded the documents neatly, her hands shaking as she closed the binder. This will not leave this table, she said softly. Like a prayer. Oh, it already has, I said gently. The moment you tried to price what can't be bought, no one spoke for several long minutes. The only sound was the radiator ticking, the slow heartbeat of an old house that had heard worse but remembered everything. When dessert was finally brought out, no one touched it. Evan had disappeared into the kitchen. My daughter followed him quietly, and his parents sat across from me, still reading, still processing. It wasn't triumph, I felt. It was relief, the kind that comes when the truth is heavier than your anger and finally lands where it belongs. That night, as I walked out into the snow, the cold bit at my cheeks, but I didn't mind. Behind me, through the window, I could see them, 4 people at a table. Finally realizing the cost of what they'd tried to sell, I buttoned my coat, looked up at the grey sky, and whispered to myself, Sunday really is a good day for honesty. Monday morning smelled like coffee, paper, and winter steel. The sky over Naperville was pale grey, the kind of light that makes the frost on mailboxes look almost polished. I woke at 6:30 a.m., same as always. Muscle memory from 40 years of being on time. Old habits are the quiet proof of who you are. I poured my coffee, black, no sugar, and set the binder on the table one last time. The gold tabs still gleamed faintly in the morning light. I'd kept them in perfect order. There's a peace in neatness. You can't control people, but you can align paper. At 8:50, I walked into the USPS office on Washington Street with the envelopes Cantor had prepared. The clerk, a young man with sleepy eyes and a Santa pin on his jacket, weighed them carefully. "Certified return receipt?" he asked. "Always," I said. He handed me the carbon slips, green and white, and the faint smell of ink filled the air as he stamped them Deck 8, 9:02 a.m. As I stepped back out into the cold, I felt something strange, not victory, not spite, just gravity, the kind that keeps things where they belong. By 9:15 a.m., Cantor's email hit my inbox, the formal demand filed with red receipts turned on. It was the cleanest closure a man could ask for, digital proof that decency had finally gone on record. At 11:53, my phone buzzed. A text from Evan.Evan, check your account. Attached was a photo of a cashier's check for $450, the first monthly payment. Below it, a screenshot of the signed option A, scanned and emailed back. His message ended with one word, happy. I stared at it for a long moment. I didn't smile. I typed back only relieved. Start Wednesday dinner. Pick up at 5:30, drop off 8, thank you. 3 dots appeared, then nothing. He left it unread. At 2 p.m., Lydia emailed to confirm that Unit 14B's HOA dues now showed an active auto-pay, not mine this time. Zero balance, she wrote, adding a little snowflake emoji because Lydia couldn't resist softening formality. I printed her email, slipped it into a new tab labeled Follow Through, and closed the binder. At 4:15, I was at Ruth's, handing her a batch of the same ginger snaps from Saturday. She laughed, reading the USPS slips I showed her. "Paper trail's prettier than cookies," she said, then turned serious. "You feel lighter." "Like I returned something overdue," I said. That evening, around 7 p.m., my daughter called. Just her. No speakerphone echo, no background chaos. Her voice was hushed. "He's angry," she said. "After you left yesterday, he threw a trash bag across the room. Said you humiliated him." "I didn't," I said softly. "I just showed him the mirror he signed. He thinks you won." "There's no winning here," I said. "There's just stopping the bleeding." Silence stretched. Then she whispered, "Are we really on for Wednesday?" "The kids keep asking." "Yes," I said. "Same time, 5:30. Tell them to wear boots. We'll try the sled on the hill near my streetlight." Her exhale was shaky, but lighter. "Okay, thanks, Dad." After the call, I sat by the window. The snow was falling steady, brushing against the glass like static. I packed 2 tiny pairs of mittens into a paper bag, along with a note in block letters, "See you Wednesday. Love, Grandpa." I drove to their house and left it on the porch. No doorbell, no confrontation. Just the quiet sound of cardboard meeting wood, and a man deciding that peace doesn't need to be announced. When I got home, I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked at the binder again. The gold tabs glinted like medals, but I didn't feel like a soldier. I felt like a man who had finally drawn the smallest, cleanest circle around what mattered. Consequences, I realized, are calmer than threats. They don't bang on doors or raise voices. They just show up, certified, dated, documented, and wait for everyone else to realize they were inevitable. By 8:10 p.m., I closed the binder and slid it into the drawer of my desk. The house was quiet, except for the radiator ticking like a metronome. I thought of Emma's laugh, the way she called me Grandpa Chief when I fixed her toys, and of my grandson's endless questions about trains. I wasn't thinking about money anymore. I was thinking about Wednesday night, about soup bowls, cookie crumbs, and the soft weight of a child's trust returning. Revenge wasn't fire or fury this time. It was a calendar square inked in blue, Wednesday, 5:30 Atus. Grandpa Days. A justice didn't arrive with a gavel or headlines. It came in the form of headlights rolling up a quiet Naperville driveway on a Wednesday night. December 10th, 5:27 p.m. The streetlights were just flickering on. Snow still covered the gutters from Sunday's storm, glinting orange in the sodium glow. I parked at the curb and watched my breath rise into the cold. My hands were steady for the first time in weeks. The door opened before I could knock. My granddaughter Emma burst out, coat half-zipped, shoes on the wrong feet, hair flying. "Grandpa," she shouted. My grandson followed, dragging his backpack, a snowman sticker half-peeled on his mitten. Behind them my daughter appeared, her face soft, but still pale from tension. Evan stood a few feet back in the hall, arms crossed, jaw set. He didn't speak, but he didn't stop them either. "That was something. 5:30 on the dot," I said, glancing at my watch. "I like punctual people." "Come on," Emma yelled, tugging my sleeve. "We made drawings for you." I looked at Evan. "We'll be back by 8 sharp. Dinner, homework, stories?" He gave a tight nod, eyes fixed somewhere near the floor. "Fine." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an opening. By 6:15 we were in my kitchen. The radiator hummed. The smell of chicken noodle soup drifted through the air, and my old radio played faint jazz from 90.9 FM. The kids sat at the table, dipping ginger snaps into their bowls like cookies were soup spoons. Emma told me about her class's snowman contest. My grandson asked how many trains I'd fixed when I used to work in buildings. I smiled, enough to know when something's running right again. After dinner, I pulled out a poster board and colored markers. "We need a new chart," I told them. "A schedule just for us." We wrote in block letters across the top. Grandpa Days underneath, Wednesdays dinner plus. Homework every other Saturday, pancakes plus park, birthdays. Always Emma drew a heart next to always. My grandson wrote trains under Saturdays. We taped it to the fridge, right above the old picture of their grandmother smiling in her sun hat. At 8:10 p.m., I took a photo of the chart and texted it to Cantor with a single word, "working." He replied almost instantly, "Paper protects people. Keep every receipt," I laughed quietly. Even now he was right. The schedule was more than a list. It was proof of peace. On the drive back, the kids sang carols in the back seat, mangling the lyrics but hitting the rhythm. When I pulled into their driveway, Evan was already waiting at the door. He opened it as the kids bounded past him, shouting good nights. He gave me a look that was half glare, half gratitude. The kind a man gives when the ground beneath him is just beginning to feel solid again. "Everything go okay?" he asked, voice low. "Better than okay," I said. "We're all on schedule." He nodded once, awkward, hands in his pockets. "I made the payment today. Should hit by morning." I said. "Thank you." The snow squeaked under my boots as I stepped back toward the car. Before I got in, I heard my daughter call softly from the door, "Dad." "Thank you." I waved without turning. Some moments don't need faces, just distance and grace. By January 1st, Evan's autopay cleared exactly at midnight, $450, neat and automatic. On January 15th, he forwarded a mortgage pre-approval, asking about early settlement. I sent back the same terms we'd written in ink, $39,890 by March 31st for lien release. "Otherwise, continue monthly with no change to visitation," he replied with 2 words. "Understood. Thanks." Justice, I realized, wasn't punishment. It was rhythm, repayment, routine, respect. By January 20th, Grandpa Days had 5 neat check marks. Emma colored each one in green crayon. My grandson counted them aloud, beaming. "That's 5 in a row, Grandpa." "You never miss," I smiled. "That's the deal, kiddo. No more missed days." Justice didn't need applause. It just needed follow-through. The court never called. The sheriff never showed. But every Wednesday at 5:30, when 2 pairs of boots stamped snow onto my rug and laughter filled my kitchen again, I knew the verdict had already been delivered. Justice at last. Sounded like children's laughter echoing through an old man's quiet house. January thawed slow that year. Like even the weather was reluctant to change. The snow outside turned to slush, and the gutters dripped all day long. Inside, my house finally sounded alive again. Boots on the mat. Kids' laughter under the hum of the radiator. The kettle clicking at 5:25 p.m. sharp every Wednesday. I didn't think much about the binder anymore. It lived on the corner of my desk under an old lamp, spine facing the wall. The gold tabs had dulled from handling, but that was fine. It wasn't a weapon now. It was history. We stuck to the schedule. Wednesdays, dinner and homework. Every other Saturday, pancakes and the park. Evan stayed distant, polite when he needed to be. He'd nod when I arrived, say drive safe when I left. But he never mentioned the loan, the payments, or the binder. Maybe he thought silence made it all go away. Maybe that was his version of peace. I didn't mind. Some silences are earned. By mid-January, my daughter started stopping by again. Just her, no kids. Sunday afternoons, 3 p.m. sharp, like clockwork. She'd bring a bag of clementines and sit at the kitchen table while I tinkered with whatever needed fixing. The squeaky cabinet hinge, the loose drawer pull, the smoke alarm that blinked like it was thinking too hard. We didn't talk about that night in Downers Grove. Not directly. But it hung there between us, quieter each week, like dust settling. One grey afternoon she asked, "Can I see the note again?" I froze for a second. "Which one?" "The one you made him sign. The loan." I brought it from the desk. The paper was slightly curled at the edges, the notary stamp pressed deep enough to feel through the back. We sat together at the table while she read. Her lips moved silently as her finger traced Ruth's neat cursive, then stopped on the clause about alienation of familial access. Her voice caught. "I thought you wrote this to trap him." "I wrote it," I said, "to protect you." "And them. He just tripped himself, walking backward into it," she nodded slowly. "I was angry at you," she whispered. "Thought you were trying to control us." "I was trying not to lose you." Her eyes welled, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You didn't." After she left, I sat there for a while, staring at the empty mug she'd used. The faint circle of tea on the wood looked like a seal of something gentler than revenge. Closure. Maybe. That week, I bought a blank ledger notebook from Anderson's bookshop. Same brand as the one I'd used for the evidence binder. But this one wasn't for receipts or legal letters. On the first page, I wrote, "Hours, not dollars." Then under it, I began recording every visit. Jan 8, soup night, 2.5 hours. Laughter during spelling practice. Jan 11, sledding 3 hours. Emma fell twice, laughed both times. Jan 15, pancakes and model trains, 4 hours. By the end of the month, I'd logged 54 hours. February brought 62. Time, the one currency no one can extort, started filling the pages like a balance being restored. On February 28th, a text came in from Evan at 9:42 p.m. "Evan, wired $10,000 today toward balance. Can we talk about adding Sundays? Church mornings, maybe?" I stared at it a while, then typed back, "Yes, but the schedule isn't leverage. It's a promise." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. But that was answer enough. By March, a for sale sign sprouted in front of their house. Evan had a closing lined up, he said. A new start. My daughter called it downsizing. I called it gravity catching up. Sometimes justice doesn't leave scars. It just rearranges what's broken so it fits back into the world differently. One evening, Emma pointed at the framed Grandpa Days chart on my fridge. "Why do you keep it there if we already know it by heart?" "So I never forget it's real," I told her. She grinned. "You could write it in your new book too." I did. Right next to the line where I'd written hours, not dollars. By the time March ended, I realized revenge had turned into something else. Not rage, not victory, just structure. Love with a spine, the kind my family needed even if they didn't know it yet. March 31st. Morning sunlight slanted through the blinds in thin gold bars, catching on the edges of my desk. There it was, the last page of the ledger. I didn't need to check the math anymore, but habit made me do it anyway. Every payment logged, every Wednesday marked with small notes in the margin. Soup night, Emma's spelling bee. Train set fixed. At 9:04 a.m., my phone pinged. A message from the bank. Incoming wire 39,290. The number didn't shock me. It just sat there, clean and still, like a period at the end of a long, angry sentence. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for nearly a year. Justice, when it finally lands, is never loud. It just stops the noise. At 4:45 p.m., Evan texted, "Coffee?" 5 p.m., Washington Street. To sign release, simple, short, professional. The tone of a man who'd finally learned brevity from experience. The cafe was half empty when I walked in, that in-between hour where laptops outnumber people. Evan was already there, sitting by the window. He wasn't wearing his usual grin or his salesman's armor. Just a dark coat, crisp shirt, hair combed back, and a posture that didn't quite fit the chair. He stood when I approached, hand hovering awkwardly before deciding not to offer it. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was quieter, less glass, more gravel. I sat. The smell of espresso and baked bread filled the air. Between us on the table sat two things: the cashier's check receipt and the settlement confirmation from his bank. I laid the lien release beside them, already signed and notarized. Ruth's neat stamp gleamed faintly under the light. He pushed the documents toward me, then exhaled hard through his nose. "I shouldn't have." He stopped, swallowed, started again. "I won't do that again, to you. Or to them," I nodded once. "Good." He rubbed his temples. "You were right." He bowed. "Boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls," I said. "They're doors that only open one way. You had the key the whole time." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Guess I lost it in all the noise." Outside, people passed by, their reflections gliding across the cafe window like faint ghosts. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he cleared his throat. "Do you want to take them this weekend? No schedule, just..." "Because..." I looked up at him, searching for the catch. There wasn't one. His eyes, tired, older somehow, were steady. No arrogance, just something that looked a lot like understanding. "That would be nice," I said. "They've been asking about baking again." He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting a little. "Emma says you make better cookies than me." "Truth has a way of getting around," I said. We both laughed then. Small, cautious laughter, but real. It felt like breathing after holding your breath underwater. When the check and documents were signed, I slid the binder back into my briefcase. He reached for his coffee and hesitated. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I did. For a while. But hate's just another kind of rent. Costs you more the longer you hold it," he nodded slowly. "You always talk like a lawyer." I talked like a man who learned to write things down. Outside, the wind had softened. The world smelled faintly of thawing earth and espresso. I stood, coat folded over my arm. "You did the right thing today," I said. He nodded again, eyes glassy but calm. "So did you, eventually." We both smiled, uneasy, human. Then I left. Back home, I placed the binder on the shelf behind the cookbooks, the ones my wife used to keep for Christmas recipes. It didn't belong on the desk anymore. It had earned its rest. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. On the counter sat a note from my daughter, left earlier in the day. "See you Saturday. The kids can't wait. We're bringing oranges again." I ran my thumb over the words, then over the binder's worn spine. Some stories end in flames. Mine ended in balance sheets and forgiveness brewed over coffee. Before turning off the lights, I whispered to the stillness, "You didn't lose me. You tried to sell me." And I simply declined the offer. Then I closed the door to the study, and the house, my peace, exhaled with me.